Hello. We are talking today about the discipline of devotion. I am back in my office, finishing up some stuff for this week. The staff is on vacation next week, so there will not be a video next week, but I am leaving you with something that is appropriate to spread over the course of 2 weeks. So the discipline of devotion. This is an amalgamation of many of the things we've already talked about. So it has aspects of wonder. It has some aspects of study in some ways. It certainly has aspects of attentiveness, listening, when we talked about prayer practices from several weeks ago. But the key thing about devotion, the thing that makes it distinct, is that the practice of devotion is fundamentally a practice of routine. And it's a particular kind of routine in that it is a routine of prayer. Now, devotional practice is really common in like monastic circles, and people who've taken holy orders. They might have devotions to the Blessed Sacrament. They might have devotions to Mary. They might have devotions to the saints or to angels, or a particular kind of devotion to the Trinity. Or there's versions of like particular devotions to Jesus, one of which will probably be incredibly familiar to you, which is the Stations of the Cross. And so if we take something like the Stations of the Cross, what are we actually talking about when we talk about devotion? What is it that makes the Stations of the Cross a devotion? Well, using the Stations of the Cross as an example of other forms of devotion, the idea is that you start in a posture of prayer, and then you spend time praying and reading scripture and meditating on some deep aspect of the mysteries of our faith. So for instance, in the Stations of the Cross, the first station is that Jesus is condemned to death. And you think about that. You think about the scripture, you pray the prayers alongside it, and then sometimes you physically move in a space, or sometimes you just turn the page, but you move on to the next part. Jesus takes up his cross, and it takes you through the whole sequence of Jesus's crucifixion. And you basically reserve 20 minutes, maybe an hour, to just really intentional prayer that is set and defined around exploring this one particular mystery of our faith. And then what makes it a devotion is it's something that you continue to do regularly. You might do it for a season, you might do it for years. It just depends on what your commitments end up being. But for instance, it's really common to pray the Stations of the Cross every Friday in Advent around noon, because that's the time of the crucifixion. So from noon to 3 is the window of time that most people usually pray the devotions of the Stations of the Cross. But lesser known devotions are amazing. So for instance, the St. Augustine prayer book, which is one of my favorite prayer books for like modern kinds of devotions and things like that, there's a devotion on the resurrection and for Eastertide. So much like the Stations of the Cross, there are actually stations for Easter. So you meditate on the earthquake, and then that takes you into being at the tomb, and then Peter and the beloved disciple going to the tomb. Mary Magdalene encounters the risen Lord on the road to Emmaus. Like it sets you out to be in that mindset for Easter. What are the mysteries that are happening? Now, mysteries is also a term that's sometimes used in circles where the devotion is much more attached to marveling at things and pondering them. So a good example of this would be devotions to the Blessed Virgin Mary. There are joyful mysteries and sorrowful mysteries attached to devotion of the Blessed Virgin Mary. The joyful mysteries are things like the Annunciation and Mary meeting Elizabeth, and all of these moments in Mary's life where God is at work and is doing extraordinary things. And then there are the sorrowful mysteries, which include things like meditating on Jesus's agony in the garden. It's in which you meditate on the aspects of Jesus's life that would have brought sorrow to his mom. And it invites you to think about it from that perspective. What would it be like to be the mother of Jesus as he undergoes these things. It shifts your point of view a little bit and invites you to meditate on that kind of perspective, to be able to see Jesus a little bit differently or to draw closer to him by relating to him in that way. But similarly, there's also devotions to Saint Joseph, in which you think about what it would like to be the earthly father of Jesus, and you meditate on what it means to have that responsibility and how the necessity of Joseph's place in that line is disclosed to him over time. There's many that you could go for. I am particularly fond of Eucharistic devotions, which is where you pray before the Blessed Sacrament. It's a lot of adoring Jesus. You just announce who Jesus is, that he's merciful, that he's kind, that he is wise, that he is generous and loving. You put yourself in a posture of adoration and just beholdenness to this person of Jesus. So how do you live this out in your regular life? Well, if you're a monk, you could take like 5 hours a day and do devotional practice regularly. Most of us do not have that particular luxury. So instead, my recommendation would be to start pretty simple. If you're not too sure about praying with Mary or praying with Joseph or praying with the saints, that's okay. You don't have to go hard too quick on that kind of stuff. You just ease off of that. Maybe you just spend some time praying the Stations of the Cross. You make a commitment to yourself that once a week, maybe twice a week, maybe every day, if you want to, you take time and you sit down and you pray the Stations of the Cross. I'll include a link in the description for this video, a link to a good Stations of the Cross, and maybe some links to some other ideas as well. Then there are some things that you might consider in the future, which are more like incidental devotions. So for instance, there's a devotional practice to pray for someone who has recently died over the course of 9 days. Day 1, you have a set prayer. Day 2, you have a set prayer. It's an increasing rhythm of marking that time so that at the end of day 9, what you've marked out is a willingness to sit and to be comforted by, but also be able to be in conversation with the reality of your grief. That it is something that it is okay to feel and that it is okay to be present to it, but that Jesus is also present with you to it at the same time. And there's lots of other kinds of devotions that you can look into. Some people, it's as simple as a particular prayer they say every single day. That's fine. Devotional practice, as typically understood, is going to end up being something like the Stations or a rotation of the Hail Marys, full rosary kind of thing, or a consistent engagement with a particular meditation on aspects of Jesus's life, which could come in a lot of forms. It's a sustained engagement. So it's combining a lot of stuff we've talked about together, right? It's combining study, it's combining prayer, it's combining attention and being present to the moment. But it culminates in this devotion, this desire to have a particular posture towards something about the mysteries of God and to be open to them. So over the next 2 weeks, I invite you to take up a devotional practice. Stations of the Cross is a really great thing to do, and just self-pace. Read through one, sit with it, pray about it, reflect with God about it, move on to the next one. If you're in that kind of place where you're like, I don't have a ton of time, guess what? There's 14 Stations of the Cross and you've got 2 weeks. So you could do just one station every single day. It's about a page this big to get through it. You could take 10 minutes every day to spend time in prayer, meditating on just that one station. And then throughout your day, think about how it comes back up to you. And maybe you close the night by doing the same one over again, something like that. Again, if you have questions or anything else, please feel to reach out. There'll be a lower third that has an email address here. Thank you for all of you who reached out about book recommendations. That was really fun to do. And in 2 weeks, when we come back, we are going to be talking about icons, which are both like that thing, but also those things, and how they're both modern and contemporary and ancient at the same time. And we're going to do 3 weeks on how to bring icon and prayer with icons into your daily routine, which is really fun and has been very beneficial in my life, but also I have discovered has often been beneficial to people who were always taught that images were not okay to have in church. There's a lot of healing that can happen, and we'll talk about the different kinds of ways we might engage art in order to pray better with God. But until then, take up a devotional practice, practice it out, see what comes of it, see what God is telling you in the midst of it, and I will see you in 2 weeks. Bye.